All right, it's 3 o'clock on, I guess, the fourth Thursday of the month. Where are we? So that can only mean one thing. It's the KTA Transportation Authority meeting. Today, we need to determine a quorum. Mr. Lawhorn, can you do that for us?
We got five. We have 5 members present. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. Very good. Next on the agenda is approval of previous board meetings minutes from September. Any questions or comments related to the board, to the minutes? Need a motion to approve? Who's so brave?
I'll approve.
Okay,
To approve.
motion and a second. All right, I heard a second as well. Any discussion or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have approved minutes. All right, reports. I don't have any from a chair standpoint, but we'll pass the mic maybe to some of the commissioners. Do any of our commissioners have any comments today?
Is this where I would bring this up?
This is it.
Okay.
Commissioner Durham.
Yes, thank you. So basically what, I think everybody here has a draft now, yeah. So I wrote this up. It's a draft of a resolution that I would like to have some discussion on. Wow, this mic is so loud. Basically, you know, the city, and if I need to read the whole resolution, I can for the record. Y'all just let me know. But basically where the city is doing its missing middle housing proposal right now, one of the things in reading the proposal that I noticed that I think is a very large mistake is that within their proposal, it's section 4.6.d, and it's parking standards. And at the very top of it, the first item basically says that the parking standards for missing middle, which as of right now, I don't know if the city has or plans to update this since it's been delayed at the Planning Commission for 2 months, but it would require I think it's a minimum of at least one space, but it says that those standards essentially supersede all other parking standards. And if I'm understanding that correctly, that would mean that even the 30% reduction that is currently code, if you're within a quarter mile of a transit route, that it would supersede that. Now, I might be misunderstanding, and I've tried to call the city, but I didn't get in touch. I had to leave Cheryl Wall a message. But just to be safe, what I wanted to do was have a discussion on sending the city a resolution for us to recommend they either remove that line or rephrase it, because I think it's, you know, as we often discuss, land use is insanely important. Like, it is the most important thing probably other than frequency when it comes to transit working well. And I think we're at a point now in our society, there have been plenty of studies done showing that minimum parking mandates are only detrimental to things like transit. And so I definitely want to make sure that these new standards in the missing middle don't take away that potential for a reduction near transit. But what I was also hoping for discussion on is, I believe personally that Knoxville is at a point, especially with our transit lines being redone and some of them being 15-minute frequency, to where we need to reevaluate that 30% reduction itself. And so one of the other things that I'm recommending in this resolution is that we ask the city to bump that up. Ideally, I think it makes sense that if you're within a quarter mile of a transit route that you should have no parking mandates. Again, what that means is not that you cannot, it doesn't mean you're not allowed to provide parking. It just means that these numbers that are literally just kind of arbitrary, if you look up the history of where we get the numbers for how much parking you need for these various uses. It doesn't mean that you can't provide parking, but it allows the person that's developing the parcel to work with, you know, the neighborhood and to examine themselves on a case-by-case basis how much parking is appropriate. You know, I'm also worried that, you know, the city, they've passed their Vision Zero plan, which is trying to lower pedestrian deaths. They're trying to build up our tree canopy with their master forest plan, and they have all these emissions reduction goals, and quite frankly, mandating parking goes against all of those. And so I would like to discuss what you all think about recommending that within a quarter mile, we either remove parking minimums, like the requirement for them. Again, you're allowed to build them, but we would just, as an entity of the city, say you can figure it out on your own, or take that 30%, raise it. I threw in 75%. That, again, is an arbitrary number, we can debate that. And then potentially in the future, adding another layer to if something's within a half mile of a transit corridor, which is just a 10-minute walk, that there is also some form of parking reduction. And I didn't put a number, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 20, I don't know. But I would just like to start having that discussion because I think, especially for item 1, because that's time constrained to when the city would present in December the plan again to the Planning Commission for missing middle. I would like to, make sure that at least we discuss that before the December Planning Commission. So that's kind of in a nutshell what it is. So I am open for questions and comments and critiques. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions regarding the draft resolution?
Chair, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Lawhorn.
I have no now I'm on. I have no comment substantively, just from a procedural standpoint. I do think whatever the will of the KTA may be, that we, if we desire discussion today, I would ask we move that to new business.
Okay.
And then take no action today, have discussion only, and then put that, any consideration of the resolution on the next meeting agenda. A lot of substance here. And I think just for the fairness of everyone's consideration, there may need to be some study and some evaluation, maybe some calling of, city council representatives and city administration on these topics. So that would be my suggestion.
And just for my clarification, sorry, in the future, any resolution would be new business, correct? Procedurally.
I'm sorry, said that again?
So just going forward, for my knowledge, any time a resolution is brought forth, it would just go under new business.
Yes, I think I'm just trying to be a stickler for the agenda.
Okay, oh, gotcha. Okay.
But yes, that's the appropriate place to discuss. There's nothing wrong with bringing it up and explaining, hey, I'd like to add this to the agenda.
Okay, gotcha.
No problem whatsoever, and it wasn't a complaint by any means.
And on that note, do we need to vote to add it as new business item, or can we just address it at that time?
The chair has the discretion to add new items to
All
the
right,
agenda.
well then, I'll do so. We'll add this item to discuss in new business later on the agenda. Hear any objections? Okay. Moving along, any other commissioner comments? None? Okay, very good. Staff?
I just have 3 items. November 7th is Election Day, and CAT will be providing free rides on that day to make sure that there's no transportation barriers for those who want to vote. Also want to announce that on November 8th, Wednesday, we will be launching mobile ticketing.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah, so customers that download the transit app, they'll see a purchase ticket button, they can hit that, and they can buy a 1-day pass, a 1-ride ticket, a 30-day pass. So that'll all be launching on November 8th. We're very excited about it. And then the last item is just, we do not have this month a recommendation. This is really loud. We don't have this month a recommendation for adding services, which I talked about last month. We will be bringing that to the board November 16th at our next board meeting. So me and Belinda have talked. This may require a public hearing, so we may have to schedule a special meeting, and I will work with John Lawhorn on that, how we go about doing that. But right now we're scheduling that discussion on November 16th to add more service. And this is not new service, this is bringing back service that we reduced last August. So that's all I have for an update.
I have one question on the mobile ticketing. So folks will add payment or purchase a pass through the app, and then they'll be able to just scan it on the
Yes.
bus?
Yeah, there's a validator on every bus. They'll go up to it, they'll scan it on that validator. It'll validate the ticket.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep,
I know that's been a long time coming. Thank you.
very long time coming.
We're excited. Everybody's excited. Any questions regarding those 3 matters, or any other questions for staff? No. Okay, well, brings us to new business, as we were. I had one question regarding Commissioner Durham's draft.
Let me interrupt just.
Sure.
I think we skipped the TPO.
Oh, we sure did. We sure did.
I actually have something today.
Oh, very good.
Some of you may be new, but the Transportation Planning Organization, we are housed within Knoxville, Knox County Planning. We're a little bit unique in that we represent not only Knox County, but Blount County, Anderson County, and Loudoun County. And we have two important roles. We're a federally mandated agency. Any city out there or area that has a population of 50,000 or greater has a MPO or a Transportation Planning Organization. But we have to do a long-range plan. It's federally required. It looks out 20 to 25 years. And then we have a short-range plan that's more of a 1 to 5. We are at the very beginning stages of updating our next long-range plan. It'll be called Mobility Plan 2050. And as part of that process, we do have some working groups, and there will be one on transit. So I was going to invite any commissioner who thinks they might be interested in participating in that working group, just let me know. Even if you think, I might, there's no penalty if when we get into this, hey, I'm too busy, I have to back out. With that said, I know we will be engaging the KTA and Kta as part of our overall public involvement process. So even if you think, I don't have time to do the working group, we will be coming and doing just general public engagement, which you can then participate at that level if you want. So it's just really up to you. Just let me know, hey, I think I'd like to be involved. A couple things. It's not a pie in the sky plan. It has to be grounded in reality and financially constrained. So you may be excited about maybe, hey, can we have light rail and this and that? If we're going to put those recommendations in the plan, we have to be able to show, yeah, we would be able to afford it and it makes sense. But we do talk transit, and it's very high level. It's not, hey, you need to move a route this block. That's what the Kta Reimagine process was. It's more probably talking about regional connectivity and issues like that. So just let me know anytime, shoot me an email or wave to me or whatever, and I'll put you on the list.
When was the last long-range plan? If the next one's 2050, what is the horizon for the current one?
2045. So we have to do this every 4 years. So a lot of times it'll just shift a 5 more year window as we roll back. So, but if you're going to have a federally funded project, roads, biking, greenways, transit projects, it has to be in our mobility plan, and then eventually, as it gets closer to implementation, it has to be in our 5-year plan, which is more like a capital improvement program. So if you're gonna, these are really big projects. So we probably have 150 road projects, Alcoa Highway, stuff like that. And then transit, we typically put a list of ongoing needs like buses, Lyft vans, CAC, and ETHRA are engaged in that. But we will have some general services like, we hear all the time, we need more regional connectivity, transit to Maryville, transit to Oak Ridge. So we can kind of loosely put that in there because if it was with bus service, we probably could find ways to fund that. So those type of things will be discussed.
Is it limited to federal projects? You mentioned Alcoa Highway as a state, as a TDOT.
If it has federal funds in it, it typically will,
Okay.
the Alcoa has federal funds in
Okay.
it. So.
Selfishly have to ask about Chapman Highway. My dream would be that it's not part of the 2050 plan because it'll be done before then, but what's...
Yeah, I'm positive the Chapman Highway plan is in there. I also know it's in our short range. I think they've broken that into like 6 or 7 segments.
Right.
And it does have some federal and state funding in it.
Okay. Well, not to put you on the spot, but to do so, the city portion of Chapman Highway, what's the horizon on that currently? Do you remember?
I don't have it on me.
Sorry for the quiz, but
I can find out for you and shoot you an email.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Thank you. Worth the update. Thank you. All right. On to new business. Does anybody have any questions to lead us off regarding Commissioner Durham's proposed draft?
Yeah, I'm kind of confused, and that's not hard to do, Dustin. So you're saying you want the mandatory parking spots removed because that makes it more expensive for them to put the middle housing in, or you're saying you want it increased?
So the first section regards that, and again, I may be misunderstanding it, but within the city's missing middle housing proposal, it says that the parking requirements in that proposal would supersede other parking requirements. And the existing code says that if you're within a quarter mile of transit, you can take a 30% reduction in the required parking. So again, and I might be misunderstanding, but what I'm afraid of is that saying that these areas that they have put forth as this missing middle housing, which are largely within a quarter mile of our transit corridors, you could no longer take that 30% reduction. So the first step that I'm asking is that the city reword their missing middle housing proposal to where those parking requirements don't supersede the existing ones, meaning that you can still have a 30% reduction. And then after that, I'm just asking them to examine the potential removal of them totally in the future. So that 30% reduction would go up to just 100% or 70 or whatever is deemed appropriate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just, they had a mandatory minimum amount of parking spots just in general. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, because I went to a couple of those middle housing, the areas that they look like they're building, I don't know, you know, they're established neighborhoods, a lot of them within the city. So I'm just kind of curious, they're gonna be, a lot of those have street parking like most midtown cities and all do. So I'm kind of curious, I see what you're saying. If they don't have to have any mandatory parking, then they can put more apartments in there.
Exactly.
But you gotta park your car somewhere.
Well, exactly, and studies have shown, and I could have this figure wrong, but I think that it's on average nationally, one off-street parking space is about $5,000, which gets passed down to people through rents and mortgages because the developer has to recoup their costs somehow. And so, you know, and because most of our transit corridors, within a quarter mile of them, you'll have the availability for street parking, for example. You know, this is just saying that on your parcel, you would potentially either get a reduction or not have to provide X amount of minimum parking on the parcel. So, and I'll also say this isn't a new radical idea. There are plenty of cities, both larger and smaller than Knoxville, who have totally removed minimum parking mandates. The first city in the country to do it was actually Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I know recently Raleigh, North Carolina has done it. I know New York City's about to do it. So it's something that, in my opinion, if we don't start at least discussing now, looking towards in the future reforming the way we do parking, Knoxville will lag behind because, again, it prevents it prevents more units being built in terms of housing, and again, it does make it harder for a city to be transit-friendly and walkable, because if, you know, half of your plot has to be a parking lot, that is a lot less of a charming walk than, you know, a more urban condition, so.
It's hard to digest all of this and so quickly, but I just want to replay back to you what I heard, which is the first part of this says there's a 30% reduction that developers get if they're within a quarter mile of a 30% requirement reduction for developers if they're within a quarter mile of a transit route, and you're asking
Under current code, yes.
Current code. You're asking don't make that.
Go away under the missing middle
That's right.
proposal.
And
Yes.
the second is that either increase that reduction requirement fully or more.
Correct.
And the third is you want to extend the reach from a quarter to a half mile for that consideration.
Correct,
Okay.
and part
All
of
right.
the discussion I wanted to have was, you know, I think that, again, half a mile, it's a 10-minute walk, and I'm not saying it would be the same level of reduction.
Right.
You know, I'm saying if you're within a half mile, maybe it's a 5 or 10% reduction, but within a quarter mile, I think a 30% reduction is way too low.
One of the things that I've seen for requests like this from a council standpoint, which is a different body, and that's fine, but one is that to leave it general, a request for consideration to improve, reduce, or without adding numbers, to your point, 75 or 100%, it could be that we just say we would like you to not reduce this minimum requirement anymore. In fact, we'd like you to study expanding it.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an,
Yeah. And I
one
mean,
way
if
to
you-
kind of address all of these at once is to say,
Yeah,
do more.
yeah, and again, that's why
Yeah.
discussion time, I'm open for that, because I am very new to this.
I do have a question for Director Thorne. I'm often thinking about this. When you tie development standards to distances from routes, we change routes. So how do those two things follow each other as you change routes? I don't see us changing city code or ordinances very often to adapt to route changes that we've made. For example, if something's just within a quarter mile and we change a route and it moves away from that, how do those two link together for situations like this?
I mean, we're looking at, Kta Reimagine, we focused a lot on density, looking at our corridors especially, and increasing the amount of service along those corridors. And you're looking at parking minimums like this too, we're looking at density. Whether we can have minimum parking spots to encourage those in transit-oriented development to use transit as opposed to having a car, which is very expensive to insure and the payment on that and whatnot. So I think
I guess let me refine my question. This references, for example, a quarter mile of a transit route. If we move a bus stop just beyond a quarter mile, how does that impact development along that corridor and vice versa?
I'll phrase it this way too. Transit frequency, you can have bus stop spacing up to a half mile if you have very high frequency transit. People are willing to walk a longer distance to high frequency transit.
Right.
So you're looking at bus rapid transit that may come every 10 minutes. People will walk up to a half mile to get to that bus stop because they know when they get on, they're probably going to get to their destination within 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So it does work, whether it's a quarter mile, that would be beneficial for transit.
If I could
Sure.
add to that, what Isaac's saying. You know, you're right that we do have routes that change. We try to keep up with where development's occurring, but we also have really consistent service along major corridors, like Isaac's saying, Central, Broadway, Magnolia, Chapman, Kingston Pike. Those are, especially within the core, those are not going to go away. Those are not going to change. What I think all of our goal is that on those major corridors, we want to just continue to increase frequency on those. And I think those, you know, traditional neighborhoods, which is where the missing middle is sort of targeted, is really around those corridors. So to your point, if you wanted to specify the parking be related specifically to major corridor routes that have a certain frequency or something like that, that might be a way to sort of address that concern because those won't go away probably.
Mr. Lawhorn.
So following up on that, the other thing I want to remind this body is in any action you take, and that would include a resolution, you need to remember what your jurisdiction is. So your jurisdiction is transit. Now, walkability concerns do feed into transit. They absolutely do, provided we are on a route. And so I think we need to be careful what we do, that we keep what we do within our jurisdictional prerogative, right? So we focus on transit. And Belinda brought up the point I think needs to be kept in mind. Routes do change, and the walkability is, and the parking and the what the MMH proposal addresses really is more neighborhood focused and not so much core route focused. So I think we need to be very careful there, because having sat on as counsel for this commission now for 30 years, our route system has dramatically changed through the neighborhood or the tertiary route areas. So I don't think we should be overstepping what our jurisdiction is. And I'm not saying no to this. I don't have the right to say no to this, but I think we need some reflection and some consideration on this. And I also agree with the chair that when approaching city council, we need to speak more in terms of, we request you changes, we request you consider, this alternative. So I would certainly suggest we change some of this language about, but there's other issues out there too. We have accessibility issues with parking. And so I think when we take this up, if we decide to take this up at a subsequent meeting, we certainly need to hear from transit representatives, may need to hear from TPO representatives. We may want to have a representative from the city come in who's kind of shepherding this process to help us out in understanding their approach to this and why, get their thoughts on some of these ideas. So that, I think there's a deeper dive here than just, hey, this sounds great, let's sign it and send it across the hall.
I'd just like to follow up on that. My request was, can we hear more about the MMH proposal? I'm not particularly familiar with it. I'd love the opportunity to hear from someone from the city to learn more and brainstorm in general how, we can be complementary to that proposal. And I would like also the opportunity to read the proposal, the written. I haven't seen the most written version, so if someone can circulate that. If someone can also circulate the city code with the minimum parking requirements, I also have never read those. Maybe you know where to look, okay? That would just be really helpful, those two documents as background, to have a good understanding of the question at hand. Thank you.
Commissioner Durham, I think I can help if necessary, but it would maybe one of the things that we could, you brought this, I want to honor that. Would you prefer submit this to, or some version of this to city staff and have them opine on some of the questions you didn't get answers to before we came, or would you rather invite them to our next meeting to talk through this and discussion?
So excuse me, I definitely think the idea of, having someone come and speak to us as a body is never a bad idea, by any means. And when it comes to section 2 and 3, those requests of, looking at expanding the areas and the reductions, that is not anything that has to be done immediately. But again, the first section is my main concern, because what I don't want to see happen is this missing middle housing proposal, which I fully support, almost fully. I don't want to see it pass, say at the December planning meeting with this stipulation that would, I know our jurisdiction is transit, but I would argue that this is our jurisdiction because density affects transit. And if this 30% reduction is taken away, I've looked at the maps, and 98% of the traditional neighborhood areas that this missing middle is proposed for is within a quarter mile of our transit routes. So this proposal directly would affect transit. So as long as we could potentially get the first part of this resolution either voted on before the December planning meeting, or have the city confirm to us if they've made changes on that, I will let you all decide what you feel is best in terms of procedure.
I'm happy as the chair to submit the first paragraph for this for maybe Knox County Planning and city staff to clarify, because it sounds like there's some clarification needed on the first one. I don't know, I'm open to other suggestions by any other commissioners about how to proceed with the other items.
I don't have any objection per se, but if I'm reading this right, if we remove, you'd like to see the 30% parking just removed, and whoever the contractor is decides how much parking he thinks he needs for that area.
Correct, yeah, because studies have shown that mandating a minimum amount of parking that cost that the developer has to spend developing the parking gets passed down in the form of higher rents and higher mortgages. And it also requires less of the land to be a building, which hurts for walkability and transit. Now, it doesn't illegalize, it doesn't make parking illegal. It just says that if you look at the way a lot of our the parking codes are written, it's kind of comical because you'll have, for example, Knoxville, if you're building a bowling alley, it might say you have to have 2 parking spaces per lane. But if you go to Maryville, it might say you have to have 3 parking spaces per bowler. Like they're literally arbitrary. Like there's no science behind them. So I'm of the belief that neighborhoods and parcel developers should be able to have that discussion amongst themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Sorry, Commissioner Simon. Okay. I guess for staff, is there a perspective that you all have on parking that you want to add to this, generally speaking, in highly transit areas, other than
Yeah,
like some of the folks use the bus that aren't?
I think I tried to share it. I mean, again, I understand, and I think this is where Commissioner Durham's trying to get to, is that by reducing the minimum parking requirements, it frees up more land to develop on for that high density. And I think when you look at what we're trying to do with Kta Reimagine, we were really trying to focus on the corridors and providing better, higher frequency service on the corridors in the hopes that more density, that developers will build in those areas and create higher density. If people really care about transit, that's where they're going to live. So, yeah.
And let me add, Commissioner Smith, that there are still building codes that require the developer to provide accessibility. So that by removing minimum parking mandates, that does not negate
Right.
us looking at accessibility issues. What it's saying is that we're not going to say that, hey, for every 3 boulders you have to have 2 parking spaces, because that was just pulled out of the air.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying, but like I said, I went to the middle housing at the O'Connor Center, and almost all of the boards that they had to do with this building started off with zoning changes. So that's something that I think that has nothing to do with us. We don't have anything to do with us. But everything that they were addressing, the initial thing was zoning changes. And actually, I had the mayor at a meeting. I said, I know that's not an executive thing. You can't just write it, but it seems to me if it's the zoning changes that's holding up the middle housing, that's something that city council and the group gets a hold of. I personally, I'm just leery of saying, taking it all out of any zoning and codes and saying, let's let the private sector decide how much parking this building development needs, because if it comes down to on the cost end, you know exactly how they're going to put it. I mean, that's not hard to put those together. I understand too what you're saying. We don't say X amount of this, but to turn it all over to the private sector, and I don't like everybody to be, pigeonholed, and you have to do it this way or that way, but I think some oversight needs to be done, especially when we're looking at this housing crisis and all. And like I said, this is the first that I thought. I've always thought about parking when I was there. I'm like, where are people parking in there now? There's no garages in these areas. I lived in Midtown Memphis, and unless you had a detached garage or garage area, it was street parking. You usually had a spot in front of your house. But I understand what you're saying. It needs somebody. It's a good question to bring up. How are we handcuffing them if they're going to be building something in these areas? How are we handcuffing them with providing a parking spot? But the fact that they say, hey, we can build this apartment complex because it's a quarter of a mile from the bus, we don't have to have any parking. I mean, we're going to go on the assumption that most of the people that are moving in these homes don't own an automobile. I don't know. To me, yeah, it was like, wow, that's a lot to digest.
Well, I think that's what Mr. Lawhorn's guess point is, that there is an interrelation between development, parking requirements, and public transit opportunity. So I think what you've done is, that's the crux of it, right? Is that we want to make sure that if there's more density, that there is every incentive possible for people to utilize their public transportation system. And I'll back up just a little bit. I guess since Commissioner Durham, this is your draft, would you like to send the first part to Knoxville, Knox County Planning, or would you prefer myself?
If we're able to, I would, I mean, I know it's still a draft, but I would personally prefer if it came from CAT staff, and just so they can look over my words, make sure it, I know it's a draft, but just if that's okay. I mean, you can say I wrote it, but just to make sure the verbiage and stuff is correct.
Why don't you forward a Word version of this to me and to
Okay.
CAT staff?
Perfect.
As I'm reading this, I'm seeing some possible revisions that might
Great.
be worthwhile, and we can work together
Yeah.
on that. And then either Chair Smith or Commissioner
Okay.
Durham can then take the
Okay.
next step on that.
Yeah, that's fine. I can send it to them, and then after review with them, I don't mind sending it myself.
Okay. As official inquiry.
Yeah, but I would just, definitely want review from
There you
them.
go. So staff and Mr. Lawhorn might review this. You can submit it to city staff. I would encourage, also include Amy Brooks, the Director of Knoxville, Knox County Planning, and say that these are some of the concerns you and other commissioners have, because I think we all share the desire for additional use of the transportation system, and we're concerned about any lack of incentive or decrease in incentive to do that. So does that sound like a plan? Thank you for bringing this forward. Any other questions or comments on the proposed draft?
Do we want to go ahead and set further discussion on the next agenda under old business?
I think that'd be a good idea.
Okay?
Do we need to vote on that?
Nope.
Okay,
The chair owns the agenda.
there we go. It's on there. Okay. Any other comments? All right, moving right along. Public comments. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment? No one's signed up today. The next meeting will be November 16th in here, where we will review new route frequency, celebrate mobile ticketing, and reconvene then. Thank you.